Hello and welcome to Precontation Points video Snark. I'm currently reading through The Betrothed by Kiera Cass. This is not the first video of this book, so I recommend that you watch the other videos before you start this. Links are posted below. Chapter 35. The Northcotts come quickly to collect Lady Eastoff and Scarlet. Hollis seems to think that it's stupid for all of them to gather. However, Lady Eastoff restates that she's banking on Quentin's own misogyny. Hollis continues to think that she's a fool for wanting to go back to Isolate. A servant comes in and says that a package arrived, but it's too heavy to carry. Hollis reads the letter first, which is from Jameson. He says that he's sorry for her loss, and since the law does say that widows are entitled to money, he's giving her the entire sum up front as a show of forgiveness. And then they both realize how much money is there, which is a lot. Hollis seems to find the entire thing suspicious, but not enough for her to actually refuse the money or anything. Nope, nothing suspicious about my ex-boyfriend giving me oodles of money. Hollis returns to the letter where he writes that he and Delia have grown close. He also invites her back to the palace and says that he's certain that without her parents she must be lonely out in the country. Hollis tells Lady Eastoff all of this. She also thinks about how things ended between her and Delia and wishes that it could have been better, but Lady Eastoff encourages Hollis to go back to the court to keep her mind from things. Hollis then excuses herself, goes to the stables, and says that she's taking one of the horses out for a ride because she needs to think. She rides out to the other manor over to where they buried not only Hollis's parents, but the rest slaughtered in the attack. They hadn't exactly found a whole lot to bury, mainly because of the fire, but still. Hollis talks to Silas's grave about how unfair that the entire situation is, about how she feels like she might offend Jameson if she doesn't go back to the court, but most of all, how awful she feels over the thought that society is going to pressure her into remarrying, to leave Silas behind and move on. And I get that it's difficult to think about being in another relationship after you've barely buried your husband, but at the same time, moving on is healthy. Nobody's going to look at the grieving widow and tell her to get married in the next 5 minutes. There is still a proper mourning period to be observed. Chapter 36. Under normal circumstances, Hollis had been having a difficult enough time summoning up the energy to do literally anything, but she feels even worse when Eaton comes to collect his cousins. Hollis briefly talks about the emotional state of Lady Eastoff. She's been distracting herself from the grief, but Hollis feels like the emotional dam is going to break soon. She talks about Scarlet's grief, closed off and has barely spoken with anybody. Eaton asks about Hollis. She doesn't tell him much, but explains to the reader about stifling her sobs at night and her survivor's guilt. And then in the last chapter of this stupid book, Lady Eastoff finally gets a forename. I don't care at this point, especially since they're leaving anyway. As they load up the carriage to return, Eaton gets into an argument with Hollis over if she's actually family or not. And honestly, I might have appreciated his bluntness during the royal visit, but after a massacre, now is not the time. As Lady Eastoff goes to get into the carriage, Hollis tries to give the family ring back. Lady Eastoff refuses, saying that it's Hollis's now. They make a compromise that Hollis should hold on to it for a while, and then she can always go and return it if she thinks that it belongs with the Eastoff family. Lady Eastoff then asks when Hollis is going to leave for the palace. Soon, with the intent of arriving while everybody's in the middle of dinner. She doesn't want to draw attention to herself. Lady Eastoff tells Hollis that there's no shame in wanting to explore possibly rekindled feelings for Jameson, but Hollis denies wanting to do that. She says that she's done with royals and crowns for a while. At this point, she only just wants to help put Delia on the throne. The two women embrace, and Lady Eastoff reminds Hollis that she loves her. Eaton reassures Hollis that he'll keep the two of them safe, both on the road as well as in Isolate, and then they set off. Hollis turns to go inside, but finds that she's having trouble moving past the foyer. She starts to tell the servants how to pack up things for her trip to the palace. However, after thinking about it for a while, she eventually runs into her room where she asks for paper from a servant. She also tells the servant that they're all to run the manor by themselves, and she'll write when she's able to. She writes to Jameson, saying that she has to go to Isolate. She explains that she thought that she could be there for him and Delia, but the simple thought of going to the palace right now is too much. Hollis then jumps onto her horse, bids a final goodbye to Silas's grave, and runs after the carriage. They're all surprised to see her. Hollis explains that she can't simply go back to how things once were. She has a new family now, and she's not going to let them ride off without her. For some reason, Lady Eastoff is the one who offers up the most resistance. But because you knew that she would, Hollis talks her into the idea of Hollis going with them to Isolate. They get into the carriage and ride off towards Hollis's new life together. And with that, the book comes to a close. All in all, I didn't hate it as much as I thought I would. It also wasn't the raging dumpster fire that I was hoping that it would be. That being said, it's also not exactly something that I would consider a good book by any means. The first half was a complete and utter snore fest. It just dragged on, seemingly without really going anywhere. And I get that you need to establish characters and setting and to build up to the actual plot, but at the same time, I feel like there would have been better ways to do all of that without Hollis faffing about for like 100 pages. I also kind of feel like Hollis's feelings for Silas kind of came out of nowhere, which is really saying something considering that we were literally in her head this entire time, what with first person and all that. One minute she's insanely absent being Jameson's chosen one. The next, she's mooning over Silas and making just these really bizarre decisions. I mean, when you consider the weird treaty Jameson made with Quentin, I'm not questioning her decision to leave. What I am questioning, however, is why it is that she looked at this young man that she barely knew and said, "You're right, we should run off together." And this story was dark, and in a way that I didn't exactly see coming, especially not with the almost tearful first act of the story, except that it was probably the part that made me like this book so much, especially because Cass really went there. She killed off the actual love interest, and he's dead and gone, and Hollis is sad. However, as I said, you gotta slog through a miserable, boring, and really pointless first half of the book before you get to something that was actually mildly interesting. And I honestly don't know where it is that Cass is planning to go with this story, because this entire series is called The Betrothed, and sure, this story, I mean, when you actually really think about it, Hollis never had a proper betrothal, did she? She ran off before Jameson was going to properly propose, and although there was quite some time between her running off and her wedding, that was basically the equivalent of eloping. I still don't know where this story is going to go, because it almost feels to me as though Hollis's story kind of came to an almost natural conclusion, but having read a lot of stories that ended with this kind of conclusion, but the author still managed to drag it out into a series, I wouldn't put it past Cass to do the same thing. That being said, I'm not exactly jumping at the bit to read the next installment of this. I don't really care that much about any of these characters. They were shallow, both emotionally as well as the way that they were written, one-dimensional, if you will. I just don't care about any of them. And yeah, that's pretty much all that I wanted to say about this. And now, the moment that you've all been waiting for, the announcement of the book that I'm going to do next. The Mister by E.L. James. And I know, you've probably got about a billion questions as to why I've picked it, but I promise that I will explain everything in the first video, which will be up next Monday. Thanks for listening to my book Snark on YouTube. New videos are up every Monday. Be sure to like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications so that you don't miss anything. Also, while you're waiting for the new video next week, be sure to catch up on my other video series. If you're already caught up with that, then you can head over to Tumblr for my main book Snarks, always free and updated daily. People who support me on Patreon also have early access to my daily Snark, but also bonus Snark that isn't up anywhere else. People who donate to me either by supporting me on Patreon or by making a one-time donation via PayPal or Ko-fi also get shoutouts in my videos. Thank you so much to Dawn, Phoebe, and Nikki for supporting me already. Be sure to join my Patreon or donate to hear your name next week. Also, if you want to read some of the stuff that I've published, you can purchase my works on Amazon. I have 19 erotic short stories, 1 short story collection, and 1 full-length novel. Links for everything are posted below. See you next week, guys!